On the map, it looks almost too small to matter. Tanker routes pour out of the Persian Gulf, then squeeze through a narrow passage between Iran and Oman. Draw one red line across that channel, and a regional crisis becomes a global economic question. The familiar question is simple: would fuel prices rise? But that is only the first layer. The sharper question is how one blocked route could transmit stress through shipping schedules, insurance contracts, energy markets, currencies, food costs, airline tickets, factory margins, and political decision rooms far from the Gulf. This is not a prediction that the Strait of Hormuz will close. It is a scenario, and scenarios have to be handled carefully. The facts are clear enough to make the question serious. The strait connects Gulf energy exports to wider ocean routes, and governments, companies, insurers, and traders watch it closely. The uncertain part is what different actors would do, how long any disruption would last, how markets would price fear before any shortage reached ordinary people. That is why this story is being searched again. Crisis videos about Iran, shipping, and energy drew strong attention in 2026, even though the keyword demand around this exact question remains thin. So this episode stays exploratory, not alarmist, because the modern economy can look almost weightless. Cloud platforms, AI systems, digital finance, automated warehouses, but underneath it, fuel still moves on ships, risk still has a price, and narrow places still matter. By the end, the most dangerous moment may not be the first headline, it may be the chain reaction that follows. To understand that chain reaction, start with the map. The Strait of Hormuz is the sea passage that connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman, from there to the wider Indian Ocean. On one side is Iran, on the other side are Oman and the coastlines leading toward the Gulf states. For ships moving energy out of the Gulf, this is not just another route, it is the narrow exit from a region deeply tied to the world's oil and gas supply. That is the physical fact. The political interpretation is more complicated, and it should be treated carefully. A crisis around Hormuz does not automatically mean a war. A warning does not automatically mean a closure. A military movement does not automatically reveal intent, but the geography creates leverage. When valuable cargo has to pass through a confined area, every signal around that area starts to matter. A naval patrol can matter. A diplomatic statement can matter. A shipping advisory can matter. An insurance notice can matter. Even a private decision inside a shipping company can matter, because a company may decide that losing time is better than risking a vessel, a crew, or a cargo. This is where the language becomes important. A disruption is not the same as a shutdown. A disruption might mean a dangerous incident, a temporary warning, a rerouted ship, or a rise in caution. A partial slowdown might mean ships still move, but fewer of them move with confidence. They may wait for escorts, new instructions, or clearer risk assessments. A full shutdown is a far more severe scenario, where passage is effectively blocked or considered too dangerous for normal commercial traffic. Those are different levels of stress, and they would not produce the same global reaction. The main actors are not only governments. Iran matters because of geography and regional power. Gulf states matter because their energy exports and security concerns are tied to the waterway. International shipping companies matter because they decide whether crews and vessels should enter a risk zone. Energy importers matter because they need reliable deliveries. Insurers matter because a voyage that becomes more dangerous can become more expensive before any shortage appears. Naval forces matter because they may be called on to reassure shipping, deter escalation, or respond to incidents. So the real subject is not a prediction of war, it is a map of vulnerability. If the strait is so important, a natural question follows: why has the world not simply built a perfect backup route? The answer is that backup systems exist, but geography cannot be negotiated away. Pipelines, storage systems, emergency plans, alternate contracts, and reserve supplies can reduce pressure. They can buy time. But infrastructure built over decades cannot be replaced overnight, and a waterway shaped by geography cannot be duplicated by announcement. Hormuz matters because it shows how a modern economy can be advanced and fragile at the same time. The first shock is the one people expect. When people imagine the Strait of Hormuz closing, they usually picture the fuel pump, a changing number, a driver staring at the total, a family recalculating a trip, a delivery company watching margins shrink. That story is not wrong, but it is incomplete. the first shock of a Hormuz crisis would not have to wait for empty tanks or physical shortages. It could begin much earlier, in the nervous space between what has happened, what might happen next, what every buyer of energy suddenly has to assume. The fact is that the Strait of Hormuz sits near major energy export routes. A credible threat to movement through that passage would be taken seriously by traders, refiners, shipping companies, airlines, governments, and insurers. The theory is that markets do not only price supply today, they price risk tomorrow. The speculation, which depends on the severity and duration of any crisis, is how far fear could travel before the first delayed cargo even reaches a port. That is why the first visible signs might appear on screens before they appear on streets. Oil benchmarks could move as traders try to understand whether the disruption is temporary, partial, or the beginning of something longer. Liquefied natural gas buyers could start asking whether cargoes will arrive on schedule or whether route uncertainty will make contracts harder to manage. Shipping desks could examine tanker positions, looking at which vessels keep moving, which slow down, and which wait outside higher risk areas. Airlines and large fuel buyers might try to secure supply ahead of possible volatility. Refiners might review their feedstock options. Governments might prepare public statements that are calm enough to avoid panic, but serious enough to show they are watching the risk. Insurers could raise the cost of covering ships, cargoes, or routes exposed to danger. None of that means every country would immediately face the same crisis. Energy shocks are uneven. A country with stronger reserves may have more time. A country with heavy import dependence may feel pressure faster. A country whose refineries are designed for certain types of crude may not be able to switch supplies easily. A country with a strong currency might absorb global price increases differently than one whose currency is already under strain. Government policy also matters. Some governments can soften consumer prices for a while. Others may let prices move more directly into household bills and business costs. Some may rely on strategic reserves. Others may depend more on diplomacy, imports, or market adjustment. This is why a simple gas shortage story can miss the deeper mechanism. A Hormuz shutdown, or even a credible threat of one, would be a signal. It would tell markets that one of the world economy's physical pressure points has become uncertain, and uncertainty itself has a cost. Picture the rhythm of it. Price charts flicker, tanker tracking dots slow or cluster, refinery managers review alternatives, airport fuel trucks keep doing their normal work, but the contracts behind them become more tense. Energy ministries issue careful statements. Shipping companies read insurance notices more closely. Households do not see the whole chain, but they may eventually see the result in transport costs, utility bills, groceries, or travel prices. The important point is not that panic is guaranteed. It is not. The world has buffers, reserves, alternative suppliers, and governments that try to manage crises. But buffers are not magic. They buy time, and time becomes the central question. A one-day scare is one kind of event. A partial slowdown is another. A prolonged shutdown would be something else entirely. The fuel price is only the front door. Behind it is a quieter system that most people never see. Charter contracts, tanker schedules, port slots, insurance clauses, crew decisions, risk premiums. In a Strait of Hormuz crisis, the hidden shock may begin here, in the machinery that moves energy before it ever becomes gasoline. Jet fuel, electricity, plastic, or fertilizer. A full shutdown is the extreme scenario. A slowdown is different. A temporary disruption is different again. But even a partial disruption can matter if the people responsible for moving cargo begin to hesitate. A shipowner may decide that a route is too dangerous for now. An insurer may demand a higher premium before covering a vessel. A crew may need new assurances before sailing into a tense area. A buyer may ask whether the cargo will arrive on time or whether it should be replaced with supply from somewhere else. None of those decisions require the entire waterway to be physically closed. They require uncertainty, and uncertainty can act like a tax. It can add cost to each voyage, not only through fuel and distance, but through waiting time. A tanker that waits outside a port is still expensive. A cargo that misses its slot can affect the next vessel in line. A refinery expecting one shipment may have to adjust operations if that shipment is delayed. A trading company may reopen contract terms. A government may quietly check emergency options. The shock travels through paperwork, schedules, and phone calls before it reaches the public. This is why a chokepoint crisis is not only about the oil under the deck of a tanker, it is about confidence in the route itself. Maritime insurance is one of the clearest examples. In normal times, insurance is part of the background cost of global trade. In a crisis, it can become a signal. If insurers see higher danger, they may raise prices, limit coverage, or require extra conditions. That does not mean every vessel stops. It means each voyage may become a separate calculation. Is the cargo valuable enough? Is the delay acceptable? Will the buyer pay more? Is there another route, another supplier, another date? These questions can spread far beyond the Gulf. A country may not buy most of its oil directly from the region and still feel the effect because energy markets are connected. Cargoes can shift, buyers can compete for replacement supply, refineries can respond to global benchmark prices, airlines, shipping firms, and manufacturers can face higher input costs even if their own fuel did not pass through Hormuz. That is the strange power of a global market. A local risk can become a worldwide price signal. Some analysts describe this kind of pressure as the difference between a shortage and a squeeze. In a shortage, there is not enough of something available where it is needed. In a squeeze, the item may still exist, but getting it to the right place becomes slower, more expensive, or less reliable. Modern supply chains are built to manage friction, but they are not immune to it. A few days of delay in a critical input can force businesses to make choices earlier than they expected. A shipping company may hold a vessel outside a risky area. A refinery may pay more for a different cargo. A port may juggle arrivals. A trader may build risk into the next contract. Each move is rational on its own. Together, they can amplify the original shock. This is why the second wave of a Hormuz crisis could feel so confusing. Nothing has to vanish overnight. The world does not need every ship to stop moving to feel pressure. It only needs enough people in the chain to ask the same question at the same time. What if the route is no longer dependable? And that leads to the deeper mystery. If ships can wait, reroute, or insure against danger, why would the shock still reach people who never buy Gulf oil directly? Because once energy risk enters the system, it rarely stays inside the energy sector. The obvious image is still the fuel pump, but oil and gas are not just things people burn in cars and power plants. They are inputs, signals, and costs that sit underneath almost every modern supply chain. Aviation is one of the easiest places to see it. Airlines do not simply worry about whether planes can fly today. They worry about fuel costs next month, ticket prices next season, cargo demand, airport operations, and the confidence of passengers and investors. A sudden risk premium in energy markets could force airlines to protect margins, adjust routes, slow expansion plans, or pass some costs forward. Freight faces a similar problem. Trucks, ships, warehouses, cold storage systems, and delivery networks all depend on energy. If fuel becomes more expensive or less predictable, the cost of moving goods can rise before any shelf is empty. A manufacturer waiting for components may not care whether the problem began with a tanker, an insurance desk, or a delayed refinery shipment. The practical question is simpler. Will the input arrive on time, and at what price? Then there are the less visible links. Petrochemicals help make plastics, packaging, synthetic fibers, solvents, paints, medical supplies, and countless industrial materials. Natural gas and related products can matter for fertilizers, which means energy pressure may eventually touch food production costs as well. This does not mean one incident automatically becomes a global food crisis or a manufacturing collapse. That would be speculation. The point is narrower and more useful. Energy is woven through systems that look unrelated until stress reveals the connection. This is where the story becomes especially strange in the 2020s. Much of the world talks about the economy as if it is becoming weightless. Artificial intelligence, cloud computing, robotics, automated drug discovery, advanced simulation, and physical AI all suggest a future driven by software and data. The imagery is clean. Server racks, lab robots, smart factories, models learning at incredible speed. But even these industries remain physical. Data centers require electricity, cooling equipment, backup systems, construction materials, specialized chips, maintenance crews, and global logistics. Robotics depends on metals, sensors, batteries, precision parts, and factories. Biotech and drug discovery may be powered by algorithms, but labs still need instruments, controlled environments, reagents, packaging, shipping, and stable power. A Strait of Hormuz crisis would not necessarily halt any of these sectors directly. It would be wrong to claim that without evidence. But it could remind the world that even the most digital future rests on energy-hungry foundations. Businesses would then face choices that are simple to describe and difficult to execute. Some might delay orders, hoping volatility fades. Some might raise prices. Some might absorb the cost and accept weaker margins. Others might search for substitute suppliers, shift production schedules, or build more inventory. Larger firms may have more options. Smaller firms may have fewer buffers. The same shock can feel manageable in one boardroom and severe in another. Governments would be pulled in several directions at once. They may want to reassure markets without sounding complacent. They may want to protect shipping without widening the crisis. They may want to stabilize fuel prices without draining fiscal resources. They may want to calm the public without hiding uncertainty. In a serious disruption, every statement can become part of the market reaction. That is why the second-order shock matters. The first headline asks whether tankers can pass through a narrow strip of water. The deeper question asks what happens when companies, consumers, and governments begin to doubt the reliability of the systems behind everyday life. At that point, the crisis is no longer only about barrels, ships, or maps. It is about confidence, and confidence can move faster than any cargo vessel on Earth. So the real question is not simply whether the Strait of Hormuz could be blocked. It is how long the world could absorb the shock if it were. A one-day scare would be one kind of crisis, a partial slowdown where some ships wait, insurers hesitate, and governments issue warnings would be another. A prolonged shutdown would be something much larger, not just an energy problem, but a test of confidence across markets, supply chains, and political systems. That distinction matters because the most dramatic scenario is not always the most likely one. In a short disruption, countries could draw on reserves, companies could delay shipments, and traders could adjust to the risk. In a longer disruption, the pressure would start to compound. Higher transport costs could meet higher fuel costs. Uncertainty could meet public anxiety. Every extra day would make the question less about one waterway and more about how much stress the global economy can carry before it starts changing behavior. This is also where geopolitics becomes difficult to summarize cleanly. Some analysts argue that the United States and its partners would try to keep shipping lanes open because global energy stability is a strategic interest. Others argue that Iran, Gulf states, and outside powers all have incentives to avoid a crisis that damages their own economies. A different theory claims that the danger lies in miscalculation, where pressure is applied for leverage but markets react faster, more severely than anyone expected. None of those interpretations should be treated as certainty. They are competing theories about pressure, deterrence, and risk, so separate the buckets. The fact is that the Strait of Hormuz is strategically important. The theory is that different actors might use threats, patrols, diplomacy, or economic pressure to shape what happens there. The speculation is how markets, governments, and shipping companies would respond to a future shutdown, especially if no one knew how long it would last. And that is the central lesson. The world economy is not vulnerable because everything would stop instantly. It is vulnerable because expectations can change quickly. Risk can be priced quickly. Confidence in shipping routes can weaken quickly. Energy costs can move through aviation, freight, manufacturing, food systems, and technology long before ordinary people understand where the pressure began. If you want another choke point explained next, think about canals, undersea cables, rare earth supply chains, or food shipping corridors. The Strait of Hormuz is small on a globe, but in a crisis, it can become a test of how much of the modern world still runs through narrow places.